Chapter 1: Team owners' varying interests are disrupting competitive balance. Why is competitive balance important? Competitive balance is one of the most important pillars of professional sports, illustrating that each team enters the season with a legitimate chance to end the season with a championship. Of course, some teams are much better than others through more successful design, smarter coaching, player experience, or a mix of all three. And even in today's landscape, we're able to categorize some teams as contenders and some teams as rebuilders to either capitalize on winning opportunities or take time to develop a new foundation. Regardless of the talent distribution, each professional sport should have competitive balance, so fans can have longer vested interest in their teams, players can give more effort to perform, and the league can generate excitement for casual and new viewers. The NFL has excelled in this department, partly because any team can defeat another in a football game on any given Sunday, but mainly because they've assembled owners who are heavily committed to winning the Super Bowl. The NBA has also prevailed, partly because of their fast franchise rebuilding model, but mainly because they've instituted new ownership, so more teams than ever before are in the chase for the league crown. The MLB, on the other hand, has struggled immensely in this department, a troubling situation in a sport with a 162-game regular season and a postseason dominated by the same batch of teams every year. What does MLB's competitive balance look like? Perhaps given away by the competitive balance tax mentioned earlier, financial disparity has developed in the MLB over time. And not only has it developed, it has grown remarkably. In the simplest of terms, some MLB teams are spending far more assembling a professional roster than others, and it has undoubtedly disrupted competitive balance in the league. The best way to demonstrate this problem is looking at team payroll over the course of the previous CBA, which guided seasons from 2017 to 2021, but we will exclude 2020 since they only played a 60-game regular season. 2017. The average payroll of MLB teams was $129 million. The highest payroll was nearly 50% more at $187 million, the Dodgers, and the lowest payroll was nearly 75% less at $34 million, the Padres, indicating a $153 million difference in payroll between the first and 30th spending teams that is substantially greater than the difference in other sports. This isn't an isolated issue between two teams, as there were 8 teams with payrolls $40 million over the average and 6 teams $40 million under the average. Of the top 9 payrolls in the league, a majority, 5, made the MLB playoffs, and of the bottom 5 payrolls in the league, none of them made the MLB playoffs. Furthermore, 3 of the top 8 payrolls ended up making the league championship series, or the Final Four. Overall, the top 10 payrolls averaged a .512 winning percentage, while the bottom 10 payrolls averaged a .485 winning percentage. 2018. The average payroll of MLB teams increased to $138 million. The highest payroll was nearly $100 million more than that at $235 million, the Red Sox. And the lowest payroll was less than half that, at $68 million, indicating a greater $167 million difference in payroll between the first and 30th spending teams. This again isn't an isolated issue, as there were 5 teams $40 million over the average and 7 teams $40 million under the average. Of the top 7 payrolls in the league, a majority 4 made the MLB playoffs, and of the bottom 5 payrolls in the league, impressively 2 did make the MLB playoffs. Furthermore, 2 of the top 3 overall payrolls made the league championship series, and fittingly, the top overall payroll won the World Series in commanding fashion. Overall, the top 10 payrolls averaged a .543 winning percentage, and the bottom 10 payrolls averaged a .490 winning percentage. The greater difference clearly impacted the postseason, in which an average of 96.3 wins got you to the MLB playoffs. The top 10 payrolls averaged 88 wins, and the bottom 10 payrolls averaged only 79.3 wins. 2019. The average payroll of MLB teams stabilized at 134 million. The highest payroll was close to 100 million more than that at 222 million, still the Red Sox. And the lowest payroll was less than half that at 60 million, the Rays, indicating a similar $162 million difference in payroll between the first and 30th spending teams. That is still unprecedented for professional sports in the United States. It still wasn't an isolated issue because the overall gap increased, as there were 4 teams now 50 million over the average and 4 teams 50 million under the average. Of the top 8 payrolls in the league, a majority 5 made the MLB playoffs, and of the bottom 5 payrolls in the league, only 1 made the MLB playoffs. Furthermore, 4 of the top 8 overall payrolls made the league championship series, and the 7th highest spending team won the World Series. Overall, things look much worse, with the top 10 payrolls averaging a .557 winning percentage and the bottom 10 payrolls averaging a .456 winning percentage. This even greater difference severely impacted the postseason, in which an average 98 wins got you to the playoffs. The top 10 payrolls averaged 90.3 wins, and the bottom 10 payrolls averaged only 73.8 wins. 2021. The average payroll of MLB teams decreased for the second straight year. Interesting, huh? To 128 million. The highest payroll was over 100 million more than that at 241 million. Welcome back, Dodgers. And the lowest payroll was much less than half that at 45 million. The Pirates, indicating a record-breaking $196 million difference in payroll between the first and 30th spending teams. It was even less of an isolated issue, as there were now 6 teams 50 million over the average and 5 teams 50 million under the average. A majority, 8, of the top 15 payrolls made the MLB playoffs, including 4 of the top 7. And just a reminder, there were only 10 spots in total. 2 of the bottom 10 payrolls made the MLB playoffs, including just 1 of the bottom 5. Furthermore, 3 of the top 7 payrolls made the league championship series, and overall, the top 10 payrolls averaged a .527 winning percentage, while the bottom 10 payrolls averaged a .482 winning percentage. From 2017 to 2021, 47.5%, 19 of 40 teams that were top 10 in payroll made the MLB playoffs. 22.5%, 9 of 40 that were bottom 10 in payroll made the MLB playoffs. 37.5%, 12 of the 32 teams that were top 8 in payroll made the league championship series. 6.25%, 1 of 16 league championship series teams were bottom 10 in payroll. Half, 2 of 4 World Series champions were top 10 in payroll, and all 4 were top 17 in payroll. Top 10 payrolls over this period averaged a .535 winning percentage, while bottom 10 payrolls averaged a .478 winning percentage. Conclusion: there is an enormous disparity in team payroll that is unlike anything in U.S. professional sports. The problem is that the highest spending teams dominated not just the regular season, but the postseason as well, and vice versa. Why do some teams spend so little compared to others? You would be right to assume that some MLB teams in big markets have much wealthier owners, generate much more revenue, and are worth much more in value than those in small markets. However, nearly all MLB team owners are in fact billionaires, managing $10 or $100 million rosters. Team revenues have increased immensely over the course of the previous CBA, and all team values have skyrocketed in the same period, increasing by an average of 26.3%. The 5 most valuable teams in 2017 were worth $3.7 billion, $2.75, $2.7, $2.66, and $2.65. The most valuable teams in 2021 were worth $5.3 billion, $3.6, $3.5, $3.4, and $3.2. It is fair to assume, though, that the recent COVID-19 pandemic reversed all the financial progress that small market teams had made, by not being able to host fans during the 2020 campaign and therefore generate revenue to assemble competitive rosters. However, that isn't the case, as the large market teams were actually the ones hurt the most. The New York Yankees and the New York Mets currently have operating incomes of negative 40 million and negative 96 million respectively, while the Tampa Bay Rays and the Cleveland Guardians have operating incomes of 45 million and 71 million positive respectively. Small market teams are not really at a significant disadvantage to big market teams financially. They are historically, and as briefly mentioned, currently very, very profitable. The real reason why small market teams spend so little compared to others is that they have had no reasonable financial incentive to spend as much money assembling a roster as the big market teams have done. And this causes the MLB's competitive balance problem. MLB's small market owners are profit-minded. The Major League Baseball Players Association has been frustrated by some owners' unwillingness to assemble a higher-paying roster, a frustration they believe to be valid considering their massive wealth and ever-increasing revenues. Their attitudes have led to several grievances against some of MLB's organizations, their complaint being their lack of spending. Over the course of the previous CBA, 7 grievances were filed, 2 against the Pittsburgh Pirates, Miami Marlins, and Tampa Bay Rays, and 1 against the Oakland Athletics. The Athletics have ranked 27th, 30th, 25th, and 24th in team payroll from 2017 to 2021, a period in which their team value has increased by 18% and their revenues have amassed $200 million annually. Oakland fans have become so frustrated with their ownership and their inquiries about moving the franchise to Las Vegas that they are currently boycotting the team's home games as a means of pulling the unused revenue out from under them. The Rays have ranked 28th, 28th, 30th, and 26th in team payroll from 2017 to 2021, a period in which their team value has increased 22.2% and they have risen to 10th in operating income. Admirably, Tampa Bay has had a lot of success on the field, the gold standard for a small market MLB team, but they still didn't reach the league championship series during the period in a standard 162-game season, and they frequently trade away their rising stars due for a raise. That's ironic, huh? The Marlins have ranked 19th, 23rd, 29th, and 27th in team payroll from 2017 to 2021, a period in which their revenues have amassed $210 million annually, and they've stabilized to a positive $25 million operating income. Miami recently traded all their up-and-coming talent, effectively instituting a rebuild, but team president Derek Jeter still removed himself from the organization because ownership refused to increase team's payroll. The Pirates have ranked 23rd, 27th, and 30th in team payroll from 2017 to 2021, despite ranking 8th in current operating income. The organization sent shockwaves around the MLB universe in 2010 when leaked financial statements revealed they had made $29.4 million across the 2007 and 2008 seasons, an appalling figure to the Pittsburgh faithful in the midst of 18 consecutive losing seasons. A Stanford economist gave his perspective that the Pirates would be less profitable if they tried to improve the team substantially. Herein lies the problem with small market teams and their rich owners, that there is a trade-off between being sensationally profitable and assembling a more competitive roster. MLB teams are indeed businesses, and the owners of those businesses are more than willing to compete with a smaller player budget, even if it largely upsets the loyal fan base and disrupts the league's competitive balance. MLB's first solution to the team payroll gap: revenue sharing. The defense small market teams have made repeatedly as to why they don't spend as much assembling their rosters is that big market teams generate far much more revenue and can therefore afford more on-field talent. Even though we have learned that small market teams are themselves very profitable and can easily afford better talent. In effort to solve this supposed problem for the sake of the league's competitive balance, Major League Baseball has instituted a revenue sharing system designed to distribute revenues generated by big market teams to the small market teams. Teams currently contribute 48% of all their local revenues, including ticket sales, concessions, parking, sponsorships, and local television revenue, to a fund that is divided equally among all 30 teams. Part of this rationale is that it takes two teams to put on an MLB game, not one, so both teams should share in the revenue generated by those games. An important note is that the local revenue entered into the fund is determined over a 3-year period in an effort to save teams from poor fiscal years and reward teams for great fiscal years. Half of the figure is from the most recently played season, and 25% or a quarter of the figure is from each of the 2 prior seasons. In 2018, 2 years into the previous CBA, each team received $118 million from this fund, making half of the team's net payees, big market teams such as the Dodgers, and the other half net recipients, small market teams such as the Rays. Teams also receive an equal share of national revenues, mostly from television contracts, which was estimated to be $91 million in the same year. These revenue streams exclude the 52% of the team's own local revenues they get to keep. Revenue sharing was designed and implemented so small market teams could improve their rosters and be more competitive. However, nearly half the league still had a team payroll below $100 million in 2021. That figure is important because it is roughly $30 million lower than the actual league average. Ever since revenue sharing was put into place, some teams have actually been using loopholes in the clause, which states teams must use revenue sharing money to, quote, improve its performance on the field, close quote, to invest the money into their scouting and player development systems instead of spending more on major league players. One of those teams, the Pirates, invested $44 million of 2007 to 2008 revenue sharing money in several ways designed to create a winner. The words of the club's former president, Frank Coonelly. These ways included the aforementioned scouting and player development systems, bonuses to amateur draft choices, a new Dominican Republic Developmental Academy, and an expensive computer system for player evaluation. From 2009 to 2021, this revenue sharing Create a Winner Foundation has generated a record of 934 and 1,067, a 467 winning percentage, also 0 division titles, and just 3 playoff wins. Abuse of the CBA's revenue sharing language is the reason why the average team payroll, and therefore the average and median player salaries, keep declining since 2018, even though league revenue keeps increasing spectacularly each year, besides the 2020 pandemic-shortened season. MLB revenues were $8.2 billion in 2015, risen to $10.7 billion in 2019, a 30% increase. Average player salary, $4.45 million in 2017, decreased to $4.17 million in 2021, down 6.4%. And the median player average, $1.65 million in 2015, decreased to $1.15 million in 2021, a 30% decrease. Notably, 54% of players are not yet eligible for salary arbitration and are earning near the minimum, which should explain the very low player salaries. Small market teams are actually receiving so much money through revenue sharing that there is little benefit to invest it into their major league payroll. In other words, it is only making the problem worse. Baseball columnist Joe Sheehan explains that through revenue sharing, a player's economic value to a team is sadly diminished, If a player makes a team 5 wins better and the team makes $50 million more in revenue by signing him, he is worth $50 million to the team. But if a team can only keep 2/3 of the 50 million, he is worth a lot less to the team. In short, revenue sharing isn't being properly utilized by small market teams, and it is only squeezing players' values to the large market teams who pay significant revenue sharing bills. Economist J.C. Bradbury said it best: if you're sharing more revenue, winning is less important to your bottom line, so you have less incentive to bid for players. It's not surprising that in the recent CBA negotiations, players demanded as much as a $100 million reduction in total revenue sharing. And it's also not surprising that the big market teams strongly resist proposals to increase revenue sharing. The system would be much more successful if net recipients were forced to use funds for their team payroll. Another idea is letting net recipients retain more of their local revenue from the sharing pool if they earn more ticket sales, thus decreasing the pool of funds for teams using it improperly. Both of these fixes weren't addressed in the latest CBA, although there were amendments to other solutions. MLB's second and third solution to the team payroll gap: the competitive balance tax and the pre-arbitration bonus. The competitive balance tax, or CBT, charges teams a fee for having a team payroll higher than the year's threshold, and a bigger fee for being significantly over the threshold. There is no hard cap in Major League Baseball. The CBT threshold has kept pace with increasing team payrolls over the course of previous CBAs, ever since first being implemented in 2003. The main purpose was to depress overspending on player salaries among the highest revenue teams, but it too only hurt competitive balance and the players. From 2003 to 2019, teams paid a combined $582 million in luxury tax, for an average of $34 million per year. And of that, half was split between the teams that didn't go above the threshold, for an average of $600,000 each year for each receiving team. $600,000 is a very small boost to team payroll, especially when small market teams don't use the money for it anyway. Clearly, teams are willing to pay the luxury tax each year in order to better contend for a championship. In short, the CBT has actually had an inverse effect on helping competitive balance, and has only hurt the major leaguers since their salaries actually cost more than face value to the top teams. The pre-arbitration bonus pool is a new concept instituted by the latest CBA, which dictates the league from the 2022 to 2026 seasons. This pool of $50 million will allow players not yet eligible for salary arbitration to increase their salary if they rank highly in wins above replacement, or WAR, a commonly used measure to determine the value of major leaguers. While it is too early to determine the effects of this new concept, we can assume it will have very little impact on competitive balance. It was designed to mitigate the cost of top prospects being promoted to the major leagues. However, pre-arbitration players don't typically have a huge effect on team performance, considering they are relatively inexperienced. Furthermore, the player ranking system of WAR to distribute bonus money could fail by design. Since WAR is a cumulative statistic, and low payroll teams like to rotate prospects in the lineup late season, once they're officially eliminated from contention. The final judgment. Team owners throughout Major League Baseball have varying interests. Some, generally in larger markets, are assembling star-studded rosters to regularly contend for championships, while some, generally in smaller markets, are assembling budget-friendly rosters to have a more profitable business. Over time, this dynamic has led to a record-breaking gap in team payroll and effectively disrupted competitive balance in the league. Solutions, such as revenue sharing and the competitive balance tax, are only making the strong teams even stronger, and it is likely that the newest invention, the pre-arbitration bonus pool, will do the same. The league is attempting to aid small market teams who only see it as an opportunity to add money to owners' pockets, and at the same time, they are frustrating large market teams who aren't guaranteed on-field success. and also players who are earning less money due to lower relative value. Baseball shouldn't try to limit team spending because it technically doesn't encourage spending on the other end. And by limiting their spending, they are limiting their local revenues, which are supposed to be used to improve small market team operations. The league doesn't need a salary cap or a tax. It really needs a salary floor, and it might require new ownership to institute it. MLB has dug themselves a massive hole and encouraged small market fans to look for winning opportunities in other sports leagues. They have somehow built a system where the New York Yankees actually pay the Baltimore Orioles to lose to them, or at the very least, play with a monumental disadvantage.